office this week, people really are concerned about being able to vote safely in the age of coronavirus. But no.
Vote safely in the age of coronavirus. But what about the integrity of voting in the age of polarizing politics and a hatred for Trump? The most hated president in the history of the country and the most polarized that our politics has ever been. It wasn't even polarized 10, 20, 30 years ago. So they all want to talk about being able to vote safely in the age of a pandemic. But what about the integrity of voting in the age of polarized politics and a hatred for Trump?
Well, the President of the United States, who continues to suggest without evidence that vote by mail will be rife with fraud.
Without evidence. How do you have evidence for something that hasn't happened yet? Without evidence, but with maximum common sense. Day after day, these liars are just feeding this propaganda down society's brain, or lack of brain.
Now, many different states already use voting by mail, and it's very accurate. Over 99% of the ballots are counted, making instances of fraud rare to nearly zero.
Where's this from?
0.0025% to be exact.
From what years?
Given the pandemic, mail voting is expected to
The 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, an accumulation of when we were not polarized. Here we go again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Mail-in ballot fraud is very unlikely. The Conservative Heritage Foundation, which is a strong supporter of the president, did a study and found only 143 cases of mail ballot fraud over the past 20 years, which equals out to 0.0006% of total.
20 years! He just cited the last 20 years when politics wasn't polarizing, when there was no hated president. These people, they are intentionally lying, pretending like 2020 is the same as all other years, when it's the most upside down year in the history of the world. We are witnessing the absolute dishonesty on every channel, day after day after day.
Perhaps Sinclair too. Michael Steele, when you look at the reality of what he's talking about, delaying the election is one question, but mail-in ballot fraud, and we'll just say it again, is incredibly, incredibly rare. It's been going on for generations. It's the only way they vote in 5 states in this country. There's going to be a lot of mail-in voting this time.
These people.
And it's important for people who are watching this morning to know
unreal.
that what the president is saying about fraud simply isn't true. There are a handful of cases every election cycle, but it is not widespread or rampant as he claims.
They don't have the capacity to realize how different it is. I'm going to keep repeating it because they keep repeating that. We are polarized. Trump is hated. All of their references, all of their data is based on a different time, a different age, when Aunt Jemima could be sold as syrup in the store, and on and on and on, all the things that are not allowed anymore.
Wondered yesterday in a tweet if that date should be delayed, if the election should be delayed. From your experience, is there widespread fraud in mail-in voting, as the president says?
In your past experience.
No, and many people have studied this. Even people who really wanted to find evidence of mail-in voting fraud could not find more than a smattering of instances over decades of voting with billions of votes cast.
Right.
It really does not happen except in a very, very infinitesimal number of instances.
In the good old days, when everybody were hippies and happy and no polarization. Right. Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah, let's just send every person in America a ballot, whether they ask for it or not. So a lot of dead people get ballots.
So, not a lot of people know about this, but Jim Baker and Jimmy Carter actually looked at voter fraud after the 2000 recount. You may know about this. And it isn't actually a thing. I mean, they came out with some sort of compromise recommendations.
Referencing 20 years ago, huh?
It's pretty sensible.
Bitch.
It was in the era of Blockbuster. If you needed to rent a movie,
all these people need to be locked up.
The idea that there's widespread voter fraud in this country is a proven lie.
It's called 2020. Nothing to do with your statistics from the past. They are all intentionally lying.
Nicole, there's a saying in politics that fish always flop around before they
I cannot believe they can refer to studies from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and compare it to the polarization, not comprehending the polarization today, the hatred of Trump today, and not realize that this year will be voter fraud. Doesn't matter if there wasn't much voter fraud in the past years, past decades. I can't comprehend that this many people, these many anchors, can keep lying to the public like this. And so many of you people, you just eat this shit up and take it at face value. Use your head. Use common sense. Unbelievable. Check it out. Another day to end the week, Sunday, and Stacey Abrams, another Democrat, going on air, lying. Check it out. Talking about the past 100 years of history.
He's attempting to distract us from this failed leadership. But by invoking the notion that we cannot hold an election, cuts against hundreds of years of history. We had elections during the Civil War, during the Spanish flu, and we could have an election this time.
And
absentee ballots work.
And that was all
and it's the exact same
in-person voting. Civil War. There was no mail-in voting. Another day, another liar spewing propaganda.
It says, look, these are,
and this Trump rep doesn't know how to respond.
Justice Department used to work for the Bush administration. They have been done by the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, and they have looked at what you are talking about when it comes to mail-in voting, and they have found that there is no fraud. First off, voter fraud in general is minuscule. It is statistically insignificant.
Wrong response. Come on. Use your head, and you're doing it intentionally. Stop referencing past elections and past day and age. Today's political climate, today's hated president, there will be massive fraud. How obvious.
Of voter fraud out of more than 1 billion instances.
Oh.
I mean, we're in a pandemic, so I would say, Mercedes, you have bigger problems than this. George W. Bush Commission study, 5-year study on voter fraud. The Justice Department, quote, has turned up virtually no evidence of any organized effort to skew federal elections.
These studies were on the 2020 future?
Voting from 1982 to 2020, they had a detailed examination.
1982.
And what they saw was just 207. This is over the course of 38 years of voting. 207.
Oh, wow. 38 years. They're using that as a reference. When Aunt Jemima syrup was allowed.
You're never going to know what the real result of an election is. I don't like this mail-in ballot deal.
Watch this.
Post-analysis found just 372 cases of voter fraud out of 14.6
When was that?
cast by mail in the 2016 and 2018 elections
2016.
Academics have studied this. Lawyers have studied this. The government has studied this. Democrats have studied this. Republicans have studied this. And no one can find any evidence of rampant voter fraud.
Okay, so because Donald Trump did not run in 2012, 2008, 2004, 2000, and 1980. No one cared. No one needed to do voter fraud. Nobody was freaking melting their faces off when their person didn't win the presidency. And nobody thought Trump was going to win in 2016. So why would there need to be voter fraud when everyone thought Hillary Clinton? So I'm just walking back and forth doing aquarium stuff, doing work stuff at my desk. And another show, another liar. So irresponsible, such deception, either stupid, dumb idiots, or it's all intentional. And I think it's the latter. Check this out. Oh, a study, MIT.
Said that over 250 million ballots that have been cast over the last 20 years.
20 years?
The fraud rate is 0.00006%. So this is an absurdity. Fraud associated with mail-in voting.
Oh, because past elections with vanilla candidates on both sides, nobody really was that fired up about it. There was no social media. There was no polarization. There was no hatred of Trump. There was no fraud. This study proves it. So Trump must be lying. And his common sense And our common sense, simple common sense, doesn't matter. Just go with the MIT study that's outdated from 20 years ago. That's all that matters, right? So I'm done. Like, I gotta put a wrap on this because literally this is on in the background, CNN, MSNBC, and like every time I walk through, this is happening. I rewind it to boom, put another little clip in this montage, but it will never end. I gotta just get this live and just know that every single day for the next 100 days till the elections in 2020 here, this is the kind of shit they spew, where they keep referring to old studies, old investigations, things that have nothing to do with 2020 as some sort of evidence against the lack of evidence and ignoring common sense of how obvious it is that there will be maximum fraud in 2020 on both sides. So this whole election's a joke. 2020 is a joke. Everything's been canceled except protests. Please keep going and protesting. That's what the Democrat governors and mayors are all saying. But don't go to church. That's bad for you. Dr. Fauci, the CDC, don't wear masks in March and April. And now they're trying to say, oh, because we wanted to save them for the hospital workers. But, like, society doesn't even wear those kind of masks anyways. They wear freaking cloth masks all the time, which are very almost worthless, 100% anyways.
No more bandana masks. There's a study that just came out suggesting bandana masks and these jerry-rigged t-shirts in front of your face don't do a darn thing. I've seen way too
So all
many
you
to
pro-mask goody-goods, shut the fuck up
the
about
actual rules
telling
and
people off
enforce
about
them.
not wearing their mask, right? When it's a
Not just
worthless mask to
mandate
begin
masks, but
with.
there's going to be a fine if you don't wear a mask.
And the CDC and all that was like, oh, summer months, the virus will go down. Because it's hot, the virus will die off. And that didn't happen at all either. So all of you people that just eat up everything being said by the CDC, it changes week to week. And they are all in on this shit.